In a dramatic turn of events in the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, a series of diplomatic maneuvers and military escalations have unfolded, highlighting the complexities and tense dynamics of the situation. As discussions for a potential peace deal intensify, both parties remain entrenched in their positions, with the conflict's human toll continuing to rise. On April 23, representatives from Ukraine and Europe presented a proposal to the United States aimed at ending the war. This proposal, detailed by The Telegraph and later reported by Reuters, includes 5 key points addressing territorial issues, security guarantees, and the return of deported Ukrainian children. It also insists on the rejection of any Russian sovereignty over Crimea, a point which Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has reiterated as a non-negotiable element of any peace agreement. The proposal suggests that the negotiations on territorial disputes will only commence after a full and unconditional ceasefire is established. In contrast, a 7-point peace plan introduced by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff during talks in Paris earlier in April suggests a more conciliatory approach towards Russia, including the potential for recognizing Russian control over Crimea. This plan has drawn criticism for possibly requiring Ukraine to abandon its NATO aspirations while allowing for European Union membership discussions. Witkoff's subsequent meetings with Russian President Vladimir Putin have been characterized as constructive, yet details remain scarce on the concessions that might be exchanged. The backdrop for these diplomatic efforts is a continued escalation in military actions, with Russia intensifying its bombardments across Ukraine. Notably, a drone strike on an apartment building in Pavlohrad recently resulted in 3 fatalities, illustrating the ongoing threat to civilians amid the conflict. Furthermore, a recent car bomb in Moscow claimed the life of Lieutenant General Yaroslav Moskalik, a senior military officer, which has been attributed by Russian officials to Ukrainian operatives, although Kiev has not claimed responsibility for the attack. As the war enters its 3rd year, Russian losses have been substantial, with estimates from various sources indicating over 104,000 military personnel killed since the conflict began. The human cost is matched by the strain on Ukrainian civilians, with the UN reporting a decrease in support for displaced individuals due to funding cuts linked to changing U.S. foreign aid policies. Ukrainian authorities continue to warn that a lack of sufficient pressure on Russia is allowing the aggressor to sustain its operations. Amid these developments, the rhetoric from Western leaders, particularly U.S. President Donald Trump, has raised eyebrows. In a recent interview, Trump stated that Crimea will stay with Russia, a sentiment that many in Ukraine view as a significant concession that undermines their sovereignty. Trump has also pressured Zelensky to expedite a deal that would grant the U.S. access to Ukraine's mineral resources, further complicating the landscape of negotiations. As the situation evolves, the potential for dialogue remains fraught with challenges. Experts caution that while negotiations may be progressing, the underlying issues, territorial integrity, national sovereignty, and the recognition of past aggressions, present formidable barriers to achieving a lasting peace. Both Russia and Ukraine are navigating a complex battlefield of military engagements and international diplomacy, with the stakes growing ever higher. Looking ahead, the coming weeks will likely be critical in determining the trajectory of peace talks and the potential for renewed hostilities. With both sides preparing for an uncertain future, the international community remains watchful, aware that the consequences of miscalculation could reverberate far beyond the borders of Ukraine and Russia. As the war in Ukraine continues to evolve, the grim toll of the conflict on Russian military personnel has come into sharper focus. According to the latest figures from Mediazona, a media outlet that tracks military casualties in collaboration with the BBC Russian service, confirmed Russian military deaths have now reached at least 104763. This figure represents an increase of 2,880 fatalities from April 11 to April 25, 2025, highlighting the ongoing human cost of the prolonged conflict. The data collected by Mediazona is derived from various verified sources, including social media posts from family members, local news reports, and official announcements from regional authorities. While this named list provides a clear snapshot of confirmed losses, it is acknowledged that many military deaths may remain unaccounted for in the public domain. To offer a broader understanding of the war's impact, estimates based on probate registry data suggest that total military fatalities could be as high as 165,000. The latest estimates occur in the backdrop of a fragile ceasefire declared by Russian President Vladimir Putin, which lasted just over 24 hours during the Easter period. Ukraine accepted the ceasefire with the expectation of reciprocity, yet both sides quickly accused each other of violations. Ukrainian military officials reported nearly 3,000 ceasefire violations attributed to Russian forces, while Russia claimed to have observed 4,900 violations by Ukrainian troops. The aftermath of this temporary truce raises questions about the feasibility of future negotiations and the genuine commitment of both sides to achieve peace. General Oleksandr Syrsky, Ukraine's commander-in-chief, detailed numerous incidents of violence, including heavy shelling and ground assaults, suggesting that even during the ceasefire, hostilities persisted at alarming rates. Historical context reveals that previous ceasefires, such as the one during Orthodox Christmas in early January 2023, similarly failed to halt casualties on either side. Reports from that period indicated that 274 Russian soldiers were killed, with no significant drop in fatalities during the declared truce, raising concerns about the effectiveness of such agreements. The distribution of Russian military losses reveals significant regional disparities, with substantial fatalities reported from various provinces. Notably, the regions of Tatarstan and Samara have seen some of the highest casualty counts. The armed forces, particularly the airborne and motorized rifle troops, have borne the brunt of the losses, reflecting shifts in recruitment strategies and battlefield dynamics over the past year. In a broader geopolitical context, the war in Ukraine has also drawn international attention as peace talks intensify, particularly following recent discussions between Donald Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff and Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin has indicated that these talks have brought the two nations closer together on various international issues, although skepticism remains about the potential for a meaningful resolution to the conflict. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has expressed concerns over a perceived lack of pressure on Russia, especially following a recent missile attack that resulted in civilian casualties in Kyiv. The humanitarian impact of the war remains severe, with the UN's refugee agency reporting that funding cuts, particularly from the US, have forced it to reduce support for displaced individuals within Ukraine. Civilians continue to face the dire consequences of the conflict, with incidents of violence resulting in significant loss of life and injury, particularly among children. As the war drags on, observers are left to ponder the implications of ongoing casualties and the challenges of achieving a lasting peace. The situation remains fluid, with the potential for further escalations or diplomatic breakthroughs. With both sides entrenched in their positions and international stakeholders navigating a complex web of interests, the future of Ukraine and its people hangs in the balance, underscoring the urgent need for a comprehensive and sustainable resolution to the conflict. In a significant development in the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, former U.S. President Donald Trump announced that a peace deal is very close, following discussions between his envoy Steve Witkoff and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump's comments come amidst a backdrop of escalating tensions and humanitarian crises in Ukraine, as both sides grapple with the ramifications of nearly 3 years of war. As Trump arrived in Rome for Pope Francis's funeral, he expressed optimism about the negotiations, stating most of the major points are agreed to, and called for a high-level meeting between Russia and Ukraine to finalize the agreement. The Kremlin characterized the discussions between Witkoff and Putin as constructive, suggesting that they had brought the two nations' positions closer on various international issues, including the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, however, remains skeptical. In a video address, he emphasized the need for real pressure on Russia to accept an unconditional ceasefire. While he indicated willingness to discuss territorial matters, he firmly rejected any concession regarding Crimea, which has been under Russian control since its annexation in 2014. Zelensky's stance is clear: our position is unchanged, only the Ukrainian people have the right to decide which territories are Ukrainian. Tensions are further complicated by the stark differences between US and European proposals to resolve the conflict. Reports indicate that the US plan includes legal recognition of Russia's annexation of Crimea and offers de facto acknowledgement of Russian control over other occupied areas. In contrast, European and Ukrainian officials insist that discussions regarding occupied territory should only occur after a ceasefire is established. The complexities of the situation were underscored by the timing of Witkoff's visit to Moscow, which coincided with intensified Russian airstrikes across Ukraine, resulting in civilian casualties, including a recent deadly assault on Kyiv. These actions appear to reflect Putin's strategy of maintaining military pressure while engaging in diplomatic negotiations. A tactic that has drawn criticism from many observers who question the sincerity of Russia's commitment to peace. The stakes are high for all parties involved. Trump has faced backlash for his perceived leniency towards Putin and his administration's proposals that many believe favor Russia. Meanwhile, Zelensky faces immense pressure to secure peace without sacrificing Ukraine's territorial integrity or sovereignty. The potential for a renewed dialogue between Russia and Ukraine is fraught with uncertainty, especially as both sides remain entrenched in their positions. As the situation unfolds, the prospect of a genuine resolution remains tenuous. With continued military operations and diplomatic overtures occurring simultaneously, the next steps will be crucial in determining the future of Ukraine and the broader geopolitical landscape. Whether Trump's involvement will lead to a lasting peace or simply prolong the conflict remains to be seen. The world watches closely, hopeful for an end to the violence that has cost thousands of lives and displaced millions. In a pivotal moment for international relations and ongoing conflicts, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and former White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan are set to appear on ABC's This Week with co-anchor Martha Raddatz. This exclusive discussion, airing on Sunday, April 27, 2025, comes amidst escalating tensions and complex negotiations surrounding the war in Ukraine, which has drawn attention from global leaders and sparked intense debate regarding U.S. foreign policy. The backdrop of this high-profile conversation is marked by a series of significant recent events, including a devastating missile attack on Kyiv that resulted in the deaths of 12 civilians and injured nearly 90 others. President Zelensky has claimed that the missile in question contained components manufactured by American companies, raising pressing questions about the implications of U.S. technology in the ongoing conflict. He stated the missile that killed civilians in Kyiv contained at least 116 components sourced from other countries, and most of them unfortunately were manufactured by American companies, underscoring the complex web of international relations affecting the war. This week has also seen a notable escalation in hostilities, with reports confirming that a Russian general was killed in a car bomb explosion in Moscow, an incident attributed by Russian authorities to Ukrainian special services. The assassination of Lieutenant General Yaroslav Moskalik reflects the increasing volatility of the situation and the lengths to which both sides are willing to go in this conflict. As military analyst Michael Clark noted, the timing of this assassination coinciding with peace talks in Moscow could signal a strategic maneuver by Ukraine to underscore its resolve and capability in the face of ongoing negotiations. Moreover, the Kremlin has indicated that talks between U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff and President Vladimir Putin have brought the two nations closer together on several international issues. Witkoff's meetings, which have been described as constructive and useful, mark a significant attempt to re-establish dialogue amid a backdrop of mutual distrust. However, the discussions have not yet resulted in any tangible progress towards a peace agreement, given Ukraine's firm stance against recognizing any Russian claims over its territory, particularly Crimea. As the diplomatic environment shifts, Zelensky remains vocal about the urgent need for a ceasefire and heightened pressure on Russia. He emphasized, the lack of sufficient pressure on Russia allows them to import such missiles and other weapons, indicating that the international community's response remains crucial in shaping the outcomes of this protracted conflict. The humanitarian impact of the war continues to be dire, with the United Nations Refugee Agency stating that it has been forced to reduce support for displaced individuals in Ukraine due to a freeze on U.S. foreign aid. The agency's representative noted that the loss of U.S. funding, which accounted for 40% of their support last year, has significantly hampered their operations, leaving many without essential assistance as frontline attacks escalate. As President Trump prepares to celebrate his first 100 days in office, he faces increasing scrutiny over his foreign policy strategies, particularly regarding Ukraine. His promise to quickly resolve the conflict has been met with skepticism. And both Zelensky and other leaders have expressed concerns that Trump's proposals may not adequately address Ukraine's sovereignty or security needs. Looking ahead, the situation remains precarious. The fragility of the ongoing talks, coupled with continued military actions on the ground, suggests that any resolution will require substantial diplomatic effort and a commitment to fair negotiations that respect Ukraine's territorial integrity. As the international community watches closely, the outcomes of these discussions could have far-reaching implications not only for Ukraine but also for the geopolitical landscape as a whole.